We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Welcome back to Roundtable. We're here in Waco, Texas with the man himself, Stan Mason, police officer of Waco PD and the host of the new podcast series Behind the Blue Curtain on Blog Talk Radio. How you doing, Stan?
Pretty good, brother. Let me throw this up front.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm not speaking for the city of Waco, the Waco Police Department, the officers, civilian employees, or the citizens of Waco. Anytime I do my show or I do a podcast or Facebook Live, I'm speaking on my personal and professional observations, my personal opinion. So before anybody calls, no, this is my personal opinion.
And also here with us on Roundtable today is returning guest Stephen, contributor of Roundtable also, and the head of Indo Enterprises. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing good. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me back on the Roundtable. It's a pleasure to be back here again. And Stan, thanks for having us.
Oh, no problem.
And shout out to the Roundtable community again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. So, Stephen, I noticed you have a nice little shirt on today that says "Smoke the Vote."
Yeah, so I'm going to show everybody here. I just got back from Atlanta. I was at the International Drug Reform Policy Conference, and I met Kwanzaa Hall, which is running for governor in Atlanta. And he is in support of reducing some of the penalties for marijuana and legalizing it to the ramifications of medicinal marijuana and some recreational forms. So
I think recently they have looked into decriminalization like full on, haven't they?
Yes, it's in the early stages of that, but they are moving forward towards that. And a lot of the legislators are in support of it. I met some senators, electoral Senate candidates. They also are speaking in behalf of it and trying to do some harm reduction in the community. Atlanta's been kind of one of those communities that's been ravaged by drugs and opioid abuse, and I think we're trying to fix that.
And racism.
And racism on top of it. Yeah, we cannot forget that.
Cool. All right, and so, like, walk us through the event. Like, so you went to the event in Atlanta. There was like a bunch of cannabis everywhere, or there was it was more of a formal, come on in. Here's why we want to decriminalize.
Actually, there was no cannabis there. It was all law enforcement advocates like myself, advocacy groups as well. And what happened was we discussed how our current policies and laws are in place today, how they affect our communities, and how we need to change them. So this was there was no cannabis or no drugs involved. It was all about information and education. This was an educational piece for many people, myself included, because it's the first time I've been to one. And this was talking about the way we handle drugs is not a criminal offense, and maybe as a community situation.
Cool. I'm trying to get us on Facebook Live. Shout out to our Roundtable viewers. Now tell me, what do you think is missing in Atlanta in terms of decriminalization? I think they're a little more liberal than you would say Texas is, wouldn't you?
Well,
or progressive, actually.
I would say that, but I think one of the first things you said, we have to address the ugly mole in the room, is the racist piece about it. I watched that community look like it's been ravaged by an opioid abuse, crack and cocaine. The streets look pretty bad, and it's the lack of attention by ourselves, our community leaders. So I think what is holding it back is finding out how to right that wrong. I think that's really what we need to do, is get the right people at the table, our law enforcement, our community, and our legislators, and get them involved, and let's figure out how to get these things right, and so we can take care of our community and rehabilitate people.
Okay, all right, so we believe, okay, you were talking about at the Atlanta conference, you were talking about with cannabis, walk us through, what is Atlanta doing to push the state of Georgia in the direction of reforming cannabis?
One of the first things is we need to get with our legislator and get it descheduled from Schedule 1, and that they're working towards it. So that right now I think they have in place a cite and release, but I do want to add caution that does not prevent you from getting a felony conviction. That just may, at the officer's discretion, he does not have to handcuff you. So I would be cautious to that, people in Georgia, because there's been mixed rumors about what you can and cannot do. So I would be cautious about that. But it's the early stages of descheduling marijuana as a citation option, in the community. And I think that's where most states start, and then they start considering it for medicinal purposes as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks for giving us an update on that. I want to go ahead and jump right into it, Stan. So you are the host of the new podcast show Behind the Blue Curtain, and I've been following it at least for the past few months. It's a very vivid, very raw and uncut, and I mean, just real show. And you talk a lot about how reform can happen, but from the angle of police. I wanted you to kind of give a couple of, tips and pointers on just what you do kind of when, organizing the show itself.
Sure. How the show came about was initially after the deaths of Philando Castillo and Alton Sterling, I really had gotten kind of frustrated with what seemed to be an ongoing thing of unarmed black men that were being killed at the hands of police. And it's not to say that all officers are assassins, but I didn't see any outcry that was happening, and then there was no really reach to the community, to the people all over the country. So I did a Facebook post, and it just ironically it happened that I did my Facebook post the morning of what later would be the Dallas shooting of the police officers. And it happened that evening after I'd done my Facebook post. So a lot of officers were outraged with it, but a lot of citizens felt that they understood the passion. And I got, well, why is this guy doing this? Why is he doing that? Yeah, I'm a police officer, but there's also a problem with policing addressing the black community. And when I take that uniform off, I look like Walter Scott. I look like Alton Sterling. I look like Tamir Rice. I look like Trayvon Martin. So I have to I do this job 10 hours a day, so the other 14, what am I? And I'm not always in my city. So I was doing weekly Facebook lives, and that went, and we covered different topics, and the people liked it, and a few people said, you ought to get your own radio show. And so I went on Blog Talk Radio, and I had Robert Drakes, a few other people taught me how to get that up and going. And so I didn't want to name the show after me. I didn't want Stan Mason anywhere in the show because I wanted it to be our show, and not our as black people, but our show as people, where people can come and express their opinion and not under a time limit. We're going to talk about hard-hitting agendas. I don't care if you're a preacher, a politician, police officer, and like I always say, you can be a crack addict in the back alley with an Obama phone and a Wi-Fi connection. When you call up, you're on the show. You're not limited to 10 seconds and hang up. That's what the major media does. I think people want to be heard no matter what side of the issue they're on. They want to be heard. They don't want their head cut off. And they want to be able to express themselves. And maybe if we have more venues like this, then you wouldn't have some of the outrage that we're seeing, whether it's officers being killed in their cars, whether it's these mass shootings. People are clamoring to be heard. The politicians aren't hearing them. The preachers are telling them pray about it. The police departments are saying we'll get back to you. So what do you do when people don't have that venue to vent? And so that's what I try to do through my show.
Absolutely. And while we're on that topic, we're going to slide right into it. So we did a poll in Roundtable, and that was about police reform. And we wanted to talk about there were some of the results. But we had 52% who said that they expect better or more accountability from the police. And then there was a 47, out of 17 people total, there was 47% of that 17 don't trust the police. And so you have 52% that believe more accountability should be prevalent. Then you have 47% who really could care less, essentially. Now, I wanted to ask kind of your opinion on why you think there might be a divide from your angle.
Okay, I think a lot of that, it's got to fall along cultural lines, racial lines. You have to look at what has the institution and not individual police officers. So officers, don't get your feelings hurt. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the profession. What has the profession shown? You alluded earlier, we were talking about drugs. Okay, in the 90s, we had what? A war on drugs. And we went in and we decimated these low-income neighborhoods. We gave people mandatory sentencing. Hillary Clinton said that these people were super predators. And everybody, one rock, 25 years. Lock them up. Let's seize all their assets. We're going to auction it off. We're going to go down the road. Okay, this was the inner cities, whether it was black people, white people, Hispanic people. They were, one thing they had in common, they were poor people. Right. So we're gonna nail these folks to the wall. This crack is here. We got to do something about it. Well, it's funny because now we're into where you've got the opioid addiction. And now the same people who pushed for these mandatory sentencing, who labeled people super predators, who sat on benches and incarcerated these people for 25 years, who voted for mandatory sentencing, who auctioned off these people's property, who arrested these people, and we did all this in the name of the war on drugs, guess what? Now it's in their neighborhoods. See, they're coming home to the suburbs, and they're finding out that their kids have a needle hanging out their arm. Their wife is losing weight, and it's not Jenny Craig. See, now it's where the judges live. Now it's where the prosecutors live. Now it's where the defense attorneys live. It's where the doctors live. See, you don't have to, it's no longer over there. See, it's not those people. It's amazing what can happen in your approach to a problem when it goes from those people to, dare I say it, us. See, us. There's nowhere else to run. So now what do we have? Well, it's a health crisis. And you're right, it was a health crisis in the 90s. It was a health crisis in the 60s when they wanted to incarcerate everybody, when it was in the inner cities. Now the big approach is we're going to equip all these officers with $300 doses of Narcan to go out there and save lives. I'm not against that. I think it's great. But why? And what's the toll? Who put the down payment on the transformation from the war on drugs to what we now call the health crisis? Who put the down payment down? Poor people did. Whether they were black or white or Hispanic, the poor bodies put the down payment on the transition into the health crisis. So the hypocrisy that we see in the system is what leads to, like you said, distrust of the system. You know, it's not, you know, it's one of the best systems going, but is it what people proclaim it to be? No, it's not. There's too many inconsistencies in it for particularly black and brown people.
It can be better than what it is, though, basically.
It can be a lot better than what it is. But that goes back to within law enforcement. And I'm not calling out every black or Hispanic officer. You know, you do you, I'm going to do me. I'm not saying people got to do things the way I do it. But to me, if you can sit and look at the systemic problems in regards to cultural diversity, de-escalation, communication, these things are at the core of policing. When you first show up at a call, you have to communicate. If you can't communicate effectively, now you've got to try to de-escalate. When you can't de-escalate, now you got to put your hands on somebody or you got to pull the gun out. Now we're in a whole different ball game. Yeah, we're not effective communicators anymore. We react. We got a young generation out here right now. It's a new generation of police officers out here. The older guys, us 24, 25 years and over, we're getting ready to retire. You got a young generation out here today that grew up watching cops. What do you see? Action, car sirens, dogs barking, chases. You see all that. You don't see dialogue. You don't see communication. So they say, I want to do that. And where does that leave us? Going from point A to point D. Forget B and C. I got to get there, react, and get it over with. And the taxpayers are paying for it.
Right, and I mean, we have to, I agree with what you said. Like, we have to identify with the fact that we're not just like herd or cattle that the police are there to to just kind of push in place. Like they're yes, everybody is a human being involved, including the police officers. Everybody's a human being involved. Everybody wants to be talked to like a human being. And I think also, and I'm glad you spoke on it, Stan. It really does paint the paint the division in terms of what we were talking about with police reform and why some people don't trust the police if they're not seeing the same treatment in their communities as other communities that may happen to not be, poor or minorities, you know what I mean, or might happen to be related to or involved within, communities where there's more of an economy. And it should be across the board, like everybody should be treated the same. And Stephen, I don't know if you agree. It's just like, how do we first people have to admit there's a problem. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I totally agree with that, and I think Stan and both of you guys alluded to, these are taxpayer dollars that are paying for these officers to protect and serve, and I think the key in that is de-escalate, like Stan mentioned, and not escalate the issue, because it's more costly for them to handle that, to call back up, to call in other officers to clean up the mess. The family that is in court against the state and the police department. That's costly to all of us taxpayers, and that's what we need to realize is it's about our lives, the number one thing, but also it's costly in not handling a de-escalated situation versus an escalated situation. Every time, it's always best to de-escalate, and everybody wants to go home. The patron and the officer, everybody would like to go home because we're all human beings in the end.
Absolutely, but we also have to identify that, and we were talking about it before we turned on the camera. We don't need to play dumb. There are some people that actually use their authority as a means of control, and we know that that's not fair. Especially when we're talking about communities like Baltimore. Even here in Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco. We know there's inconsistency in how, not just in how people are treated by police, but we also know that in terms of how to resolve those problems, like the same people are, in other words, the same people are the ones complaining. And I think that's very telling, because if you're not willing to hear people out when they complain, well then how can you be so passive aggressive when they're angry at you, whenever they're ready to react, whenever they're temperamental, I guess you could say.
Okay. In that, let's go to another. I'm gonna hit that, but we got to go back and understand from the other side of the officer's standpoint. There's a frustration with officers. A lot of them are not going to talk about it. In fact, most officers won't touch any of these subjects because it depends on your department of where you work. Some people may not be civil service and they got a family to feed, and some people don't want to put up with the peer pressure and the blue wall of silence and all that. But a lot of these meetings that you go to, these officers, by and large, there's a lot of good ones out there. Sure, there's some bad ones out there need to be dealt with. I wish more officers would speak up against the bad ones. But for the good ones to go out there, they're in these neighborhoods for 10, 12 hours, 8, 10, 12 hours, 40 hours a week. They live in these conditions. They know what goes on. But does their department allow them to have free, open dialogue with the citizen? Now, see, the citizens need to understand this. Officers are not free to just disclose and talk to you and share things with you. Some departments frown on that because police departments are like little kingdoms. Everybody's got their own little kingdom in there. People don't want to get their feelings hurt. They don't want to go to this neighborhood meeting and stand up and grandstand and throw out a lot of geopolitical tirade and get smashed with a fact coming from a beat officer. Well, what does he know? He's just a beat officer. I'm the chief. That beat officer knows what goes on. Because people in the neighborhoods, to the beat officers, they are people. To police administrators, they're statistics, because that's what they see. Tick marks on the paper, whether it's for the budget or whatever. That's the reality of it. Right. But therein lies a degree of frustration with that officer who has to be the first line. And I'm talking about street officers. I'm not talking about detectives and traffic division. I'm talking about the officers out there working calls. They're going to catch the flack from up top if they're too truthful, and they're going to catch it from the citizen if they're not truthful enough. Now, you may have a general order that says you have to be open and honest and true with the public at all times. Then you've got another general order that says you won't say anything that brings discredit upon the city or the police department. Now, what do you do when being truthful is going to bring disrespect on the police department or the city? Do you lie and violate the first general order? Or do you do it and violate the second? See, these are things officers, they're not going to tell you about it, but they have to live by these things.
So you made a good point. And I guess to your point of the good officer, and I think all of us think that there are the majority good officers out there, but one bad apple can ruin it. So I guess my question to the good officer, how do we help change that so he or she can open up that dialogue clearly and speak fluently about the things they see wrong going on in the police force? Because that's really where I see the issue is. It's not so much the bad officer. I think I expect that from the bad officer. It's the good officer that does not say anything. Is he really a good guy because he didn't say anything?
Well, I mean, I look at it and I'm kind of mixed. You and I kind of agree on a lot of things. I'm not saying everybody's got to do things the way I do. We're all going to approach the problem differently. But I think that when you work in a community and there is a disconnect, outside of that uniform. In other words, if you are what I call officer head and shoulders, you ride through the community, but all people ever see of you is your head and your shoulders. You never get out the car. Then when you do get out, what do the kids see? You're taking somebody to jail, you're writing somebody a ticket, you're running somebody's name. They don't see you sitting on the porch talking to Miss Jones. You get out and shoot some hoops for a quick second, a whole minute. You know, you just sit on the bench in the park and interact and do something. And, you know, you don't have to be a black officer or white. That has nothing to do with it, because just because you're a black officer in a black neighborhood doesn't mean that you're going to be the most well-received there. Because most of the time in poor neighborhoods, no matter what color you are, if you're real, they're going to gravitate towards you, irregardless of your color. So people need to be able to identify with you. I think sometimes as police officers, we want to say to the public, well, you know, you don't want to tell us who's selling dope. We can't help you. Why don't you tell us who's breaking in houses? We can't help you. And at the same time, the citizens are saying, well, why don't you talk about Officer so-and-so who's profiling? We can't help you. See, the support has got to be both ways. You know, if I expect citizens to tell me who's breaking into the cars or who's selling dope or who's doing whatever, then at the same time, they expect me. I don't speak for my department, but if they ask me in conversation how I feel about Sandra Bland or the Sandra Bland Act or Tamir Rice or Walter Scott or, you know, Alton Sterling, any of these, then I need to be real about it. Not be black about it, just be real about it.
So, if you don't mind, I'd like to give a quick shout out.
Please.
I think this is a good time. I happened to come across a post. I'm going to read it to everybody. It says, police were called in a Chicago gym after a teen kept sneaking in. Instead of arresting him, Officer Mario Valentine bought him a membership. Now, that's community and law enforcement coming together. And I wanted to give a quick shout out because I thought that was pretty cool.
Sure. You know what? There's a lot of good officers out there doing a lot of good things. I mean, there are. And unfortunately, you know, we live in a time when the negative things seem to be coming up. And I focus on some of the things that are wrong so we can build on them. And sometimes maybe I don't spend enough time on the positive things. But it's like I explain to people, I live in a realm of what can be potentially negative just because of how I look. Right. When I take that uniform off, I'm okay in my city. But when I go somewhere else, I have to be cognizant of that. And so, you know, at 55, you know, I am who I am. You know, 24 years police officer, 55 years on this earth. When I retire, I'm still going to be black. So I have to understand, I need to speak to these issues while I'm in the system, and I can make a difference and motivate it and foster good dialogue and good change. I don't want to be another retired guy saying what's wrong with the system, or a fired guy that's mad at the system. You know, and because I speak about police reform, it doesn't make me anti-white or angry at the police. I think policing is one of the few professions in this country. Policing and preachers. You can't question either one of them. If you question a preacher, you're a heathen, you're not a Christian. You question the police, you're anti-American, you're anti-police. And even your iPhone will tell you when it's time for an update. So, you know, we can't have a blue chip on our shoulders. We're public servants. We're not gods. That means we have to take that input from the community and then say, okay, well, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, if they don't know, why don't we teach them? If they don't know, instead of saying the public doesn't know what we go through, why don't they know? Because of the blue wall of silence. We don't talk about it. We don't educate the public. What do we tell you? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. We don't learn the system till we're in the system.
Wrong time to learn. Okay, and while we're on the topic just of you know, learning the system and the system in general, so we had an article that was posted recently in Roundtable by the Raw Story News. The Arizona police are unable to find new recruits. That's the gist of it. They've been, for those, shout out to Roundtable. Thanks for watching and listening. Arizona is one of those racist states. Let's just keep it real. They've been having trouble with immigration. They've been having trouble, you know, with minority communities feeling marginalized. So, to me, this seems like karma. You know what I mean? Like now you don't have, like just to your point that, okay, people don't, you know, people don't know, the police officers know that people don't know what they're talking about when they have certain complaints, but the police won't teach them and train them to understand that. So in other words, like you said, there's not that identification, there's not that link. So if you're an Arizona police officer, I have to imagine you're so disconnected with the community that now it's finally showing that your people have not enough respect for the police department to want to say, yes, I'll take a bullet for you guys too, because I know you're just doing your job. Now, I personally think that's not surprising, because, I mean, again, Arizona's racist, so why wouldn't this be an issue for them up the road? But I wanted to get your take, Stephen and Stan, on it whenever you're ready.
Well, I personally have never been to Arizona, so I can't say one way or another. I didn't care much for Sheriff Arpaio, that being said, but I think that there is room for a lot of improvement in law enforcement and in recruiting. I did a show where I talked about that, in fact, last week. We talked about recruiting and hiring of minorities and the problems that they're having. But I think that minorities, whether it's white people, whether it's even poor people, we do ourselves a disservice when we discount what the job is meant to do because of how some who are in charge choose to practice it. And I think policing is an institution that means well, but has not reformed and finds itself in the 1960s in regards to dealing with real issues today. And I think until we say, I'm going to go into it to see, I got to affect the change on the inside. We can stand outside of policing and you can yell all you want. And there is something to be said. If you're not strapping on that shield and that gun and going out there every night, then you don't know what it's like. I'm not saying you're not entitled to an opinion, but you don't know. And some of you, if you can put it on. Go out there. You don't have to save your department. You can go out there and contact 1 or 2 people a week. Just 1 or 2 people a week. There's 52 weeks in a year. Look how many lives you can impact. You can change. You can win. You can slowly grind the machine down and reformat it. But we can't sit on the outside and get sound bites, because that makes us no different than a lot of the police chiefs who stand up while the towns are on fire in the background and give out all these platitudes and promises of change and community policing that don't come to fruition. You got to get in there and be willing to do the work.
Get your hands dirty, exactly.
Right. We can't just say I don't want to do it.
Steve, how you feel?
Well, I think the number one thing, both of you guys have kind of covered it, was with the lack of interest, it seems like, going in the police force, it sounds like we need to get the community involved, because you got to grow within. So that's the number one thing. I'm a solutions guy. I like to go straight to the solution. If you have a problem with recruiting, you got to get them out in the community. And the best way to do that is get your officers involved, the current officers involved, get your academies involved. Because going through even a university, I'm sure going through the police force is just like going through a fraternity, or because it's a brotherhood, and that's why they have their codes, just like the rest of us. The military has a code. We're going to have to probably break some of those codes. Change is hard, but it needs to happen, and in order for us to
it takes courage, yeah.
It takes courage, yeah. That's number one thing. And I think that's what people need to do. And for the shortage, I really don't know, because I can see a lot of kids not wanting to be an officer. What you see on TV and all the posts, because this is a social media world, and so when you turn that on every day, I have a daughter, and I wonder what she thinks. Would she ever want to go into law enforcement? And she probably wouldn't, just from what she's seen. Not that she has a problem with the position, but just that we're all a victim of what we see and hear and think. So,
well, while we're on this topic, let's take it in a slightly different direction. So, let's assume that nobody wants to work for the police department anymore. Let's assume that it's kind of getting filtered out. What are we supposed to do then to inspire confidence in community policing?
Well, community policing, and that's my thing. That's what I live by. I swear by it. It's proven effective. The thing with community policing, and I think a lot of officers would enjoy it. Initially, it is a lot of hard work. It is very expensive. It's very time-consuming. It is a buzzword with chiefs who like to throw it out. It is a buzzword for a lot of mayors and city council people. They like to throw it out. But you don't see it implemented very often department-wide. You see it, and we have a small community policing section. But community policing is a partnership between citizens and police. Not some of the police, all of them, that provides for a shared responsibility in solving community-related problems. You work problems from the beginning to the end. Now, the drawback is to it, a lot of politicians do not like community policing because when you have an officer that has a large geographic area, he or she is working from community meetings to barbecues to digging out sidewalks to busting drug houses to doing all this, the community calls them on their phone, they can talk to them, they build a bond with that particular officer, not the chief, not the department. Yeah, they understand you work for the department, but they'll say, well, I want Officer so-and-so to come. Or you'll go to a city council meeting, and the council person may say, well, Chief, have Officer so-and-so come here and explain. He has the details. Some people don't take that well. Well, doggone it, I'm the chief, or I'm the commander, or I'm the sergeant, or I'm this, and you crush that ego. So the program will tend to go away because what does that officer having sway over 5,000 people? Or listen to, what does he or she bring? Voting, whether he endorses a candidate or not. He has a lot of sway and opinion. And that doesn't sit well with politicians, which means it's not going to sit well with a lot of police chiefs. So community policing, you're always going to have some degree of law enforcement. There is not going to be, we can't find anybody to do it. The question is, when you get down to the bottom of that barrel, where the quality people don't want to do it, Dallas is 1,000 officers short right now. Then what are you going to get for what you're offering? What is your health plan like? What is your retirement? Why should I go to Dallas? And this is not a shot at the Dallas Police Department, the men and women there to do a great job. But why should I go to Dallas and put up with the cost of living, the health insurance, the retirement system debacle, when I can come to Waco and for a lot less than it costs me to live in Dallas, make more money than Dallas, go wherever I need to go with no traffic, very little traffic. What is there to bring me there?
Yeah, where are the incentives?
Yeah, we got better equipment or same quality equipment as they have. So when people are coming into policing, they're asking themselves, I mean, these what you're saying with the recruiting, there's a lot of variables. I mean, do I want to be a big municipal police officer or do I want to work in a small town? What is Arizona offering? What is the equipment like? I'm sure there are some towns that aren't having a problem recruiting there, but then there are some that are. So we need to look at, just like in Texas, there are some, Dallas is one of them. Why is Dallas having a problem recruiting but Fort Worth isn't? But Arlington isn't, but Waco isn't. So you have to look at what is the variable, and a lot of different factors come into play on it.
Well, and then that's also what I was wanted to get into is if we call it out in terms of a lot of the recent events that have taken place across the nation with police brutality, with wrongful death, and by the hands of police, it's like, okay, what if that is the variable, or you know what I mean? Like, do you? I mean, I don't know if the roundtable agrees. Like, do you think that policing could get better, possibly, or at least the specific topic of police being able to get new recruits if we pull out the discussion of racism and finally have it once and for all? You know what I mean? And finally have a talk on racial profiling and finally have a talk on the issues that we see. I mean, because we can't do anything about what we don't see, but we can do something about what we do.
Yeah, well, I'm a data guy, so I wrote down a few little data points while we were traveling down here. So I think, first of all, data to me drives everything. It's a good barometer of what's really going on. It's mathematics are a very factual thing. And so we always calculate the percentage of white cops killing black people, but have we ever calculated the percentage of black cops killing white individuals? Because that's the same data, and see, the percentage would show you that why is that skewed one way or another? That should be a discussion point, because to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of you guys kind of swore in to protect and serve, right? Is that pretty much close to what everybody was sworn in? So I would think if the black officers had a much lower rate of accidents, that they should be the highest paid, because I think it should be incentive based, because they are protecting and serving. If they have to make an arrest, that person's living to get his or her justice in the judicial system.
Even in the video games, you got more money if you played, and you brought the guy in alive versus, you know what I mean, the other way.
So yeah, I was thinking about those things. Like, why don't we look at it? Because we always look at that one side of data: white cop black person. But if we looked at the data the other way, maybe it'll give us something to compare as to why is it so much lower from a black officer shooting a white person, the opportunity, versus a white cop shooting a black individual.
I mean, well, I certainly can't speak for all black or white officers or all officers, period, but I think it's dangerous if we say, let's pay this group more because they didn't shoot as many. Because one of the things society has to understand with us, whatever we say or do, when we walk out there at night or in the day, it's us against the world, oftentimes. And we go to the unknown all the time. I don't care what the dispatcher told you. I don't care what the person called and told the dispatcher. 9 times out of 10, that's not really the call that you're going to. And I think you're absolutely right. I think while race does play, it plays a big part in some of this. I think America needs to have a discussion of truthism. Truthism. Why is it that, people say, well, Black Lives Matter. Okay, Black Lives Matter. Okay, and then the other flip side, they'll go, well, what about Chicago? And then people say, well, Blue Lives Matter. Well, let's look statistically. When a white person kills a police officer, there's silence all over social media. But when a black person kills a police officer, it's blown up everywhere. We can't get away from it. So I think that America, and I alluded to this on my show, and this is just fact. We're dealing with truthism. America has managed to paint a brown or tan face on crime, particularly violent crime, ignoring the fact, like I did on my show 2 weeks ago, that these homicidal mass murderers that are white in Dockers and loafers and polo shirts, they're not the suspicious person. Oh, that's just Bob that walks into school and kills a bunch of people. Hello, Sandy Hook. Hello, Columbine. Hello, movie theaters. Hello, nightclubs. Hello, churches. See, this is the thing. America needs to just strip the black, white, or any face off of violent crime and look at it for what it is. We introduce racism because it tends to make our cultural group comfortable. Let's take racism out of it and deal with truthism. Truthism is black people are disproportionately pulled over in this country. Don't blame me. Blame the FBI. They gave you the stats. The Department of Justice gave you the stats. I'm not giving it to you. I'm telling you what it is. It's a fact. So when black people express that, don't say, well, they're just black and angry. Well, what do you want me to be? I'm not angry. I'm passionate. I believe in what I'm doing. But I'm not going to tone myself down to make you feel comfortable in your perspective of falsehoods. Everybody that's black that's talking about some of these things that go on in policing, the Department of Justice goes in and finds. And then everybody goes, wow. A perfect example. The shootings going on. How long have these shootings been going on?
The last 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you hear? Well, they need to just obey the cops. Just do what they tell you to do. Doggone it. You ask too many questions. Stop putting your hands up. Well, when that white woman from Australia got shot, what'd you hear? Oh my God, we need some training. Those guys need training.
Knee-jerk reaction.
Right. Who put the down payment down? All of a sudden, Philando Castile, Walter Scott, Alton Sterling, Tamir Rice, all these bodies that have put the down payment on this conversation that we're having that caused Colin Kaepernick to take a knee were disregarded so we could do the sound bite. And this, I'm not taking anything away from that woman that was shot. God bless her. What happened to her was wrong. But all of a sudden, because a white woman fell victim to what black people have been talking about, now it becomes an issue.
Just like the opioid.
There you go.
Yeah, we keep circling back to the same
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting how it's all relative. But I wanted, before you finish, Stan, I wanted you to get in. You had a topic on today's show talking just about not so much privatizing the police chief office. That's me saying that, but making it to where the civilian population has just as much of a chance and right to hold that office as the police chief, who you said really doesn't do much specifically in the field. It's more of a managerial, focus.
Right. I mean, and when I asked this question to people earlier in the week before I did it on the show, they were absolutely not. Then when I explained it to them, they were like, wow, I never thought of that. Everybody talks about civilians and the public becoming more of a part of policing. So I threw out there, we had President Clinton, we had Barack Obama, and now we got 45. And all of them either were or are the commander-in-chief of the most powerful armed forces in the world, and the three of them collectively don't have 2 minutes in a military uniform. Okay, we've got sheriffs across this country, the chief law enforcement officer for the county, all across this country, that you could be working in McDonald's, Burger King, Lowe's, Home Depot, or homeless. And if you run for sheriff and get the most votes, guess what? You are now the sheriff. No law enforcement experience. And you can run all these deputies. So I submit, what if we took if we opened up, all the officers could still put in for chief. But you open it up and you say, if you've got depending on how the cities want to do it, a master's degree or a PhD, say in human resource management, communication skills, management service, things that police departments are lacking in. What are we lacking in right now? Communication. Okay, you've got assistant chiefs underneath that can run the policing aspect of it. But I believe that if me as an officer, 25, 30 years, I go make chief somewhere, and you set a problem in front of me, I am conditioned to deal with that problem, first off, as an officer, not a citizen. So I'm going to react first. What are my resources? What can I protect my resources? And that's what I do. Then I get around to the 250,000 other people. But when you bring someone who has a civilian background with experience in resource management, in communications, in personnel management, and you plug that person in, now they're the chief, and they go to the assistant chiefs that are police officers, and they say, okay, this is where I'm seeing it. They go, this is where we're seeing it. Now you've got a happy medium between the two, where before you just had a blue medium. Yeah. See, that's getting the citizens involved, and I just threw it out there. It's an interesting thought.
And that's giving the data a chance to be agnostic of anything else. It's truly fair, and it's across the board. That's kind of where I was going to, kind of the incentivized thing between the white officer and the black officer, and not necessarily paying them more, but think about it. Like as an engineer, the less defects we get incentivized with bonuses. So the less the officer comes in, like if he shot 5 people, I don't think he needs to be getting this year's bonus because he's causing the department and people money. He should be de-escalating situations, not escalating situations, because a lot of these officers, the bad ones we are referring to, are a little bit too quick to trigger. The ones we've seen, the Philando Castile, that was way too quick on the trigger. The man said he had a concealed handgun license, and you shot him with a 4-year-old. And I think
don't forget Sam DuBose too, out in Cincinnati. That was a pretty intense one as well.
Yeah, I mean, but you're right. But let me interject this, because this doesn't get discussed a lot. And I can tell you firsthand, and officers across the country, when I say this, they're going to go, thank God somebody came on TV and actually said it. A lot of people look at these YouTube videos, and you're looking at a reaction. You're looking at, well, I don't care if it's the body camera, the in-car camera, you're looking at a reaction. This is why I say some police departments make that officer a social media pariah, because they release this body footage, but they don't release the dispatch transcripts. Now, this is why that's important. We go to calls where, you got calls holding on the screen. So some girl wants to call in about her boyfriend that she's mad about, or baby daddy, or whatever, but see, she doesn't want to wait in line. She's a priority 3 call. So she says the magic words. Oh, and he pulled a gun on me. That bumps her up to priority 1. Now, I don't know you. I get this call, the dispatcher puts it on the computer, I'm reading it, where they're telling me, okay, you slapped your girlfriend and kicked her and put a gun to her head and said you're going to shoot her. Now, me and my partner pull up. We're not going to walk up to you and go, excuse me, sir, do you have a gun with you today? What are we going to do? We're going to pull out a gun. Now, what is the crowd seeing? You're saying, I don't have a gun. We search you, we do all that. No, you don't have a gun. But what's blowing across the video screen now? These officers just pointed their gun at this brother for no reason. And the police department should come straight forward to protect that officer, if nothing else, and say, here is the audio transcript of the phone call where his girlfriend said he had a gun. But they don't do that. So that officer now is cast out social media forever.
And from a civilian standpoint, I think what that does is that it doesn't protect them in that instance, but they also want to protect when they have the foul play
right
on there. Because if they release it once, you got to release it all the time.
Right, and they should know, but that's the thing. The public is clamoring for consistency. Let's go back to what the note said, consistency. Now, if there's an investigation, if you can't release the audio transcripts, don't release the video.
Right. Yeah.
But to me, to release the video of what I am doing at a scene when 300 people recorded me on their phones doing what I'm doing, anyway, why don't you release what that caller is telling the dispatcher who is telling me? Because a lot of these videos watch the officer's head. And most of us are radios. If we're right-handed, the radio's on the left side. And you'll see these officers twitching their head.
Yeah,
They're listening to the radio. They're being told something. And I think a lot of the people, and I'll eviscerate some of these videos too when they're not right, but I think sometimes we have to go deeper, major media, and say, give us the dispatch transcripts. You know, the brother that went into Walmart and bought a BB gun, that officer was told by a caller right there on the phone, 911, what? He's got an AR-15, he's pointing at people, he's loading it. That poor officer went in there, white officer, shot that brother. What's the first outrage? Oh, he gunned down a black guy. And then we find out the guy that called 911 lied and said this guy was doing all that. Officer's not going to walk in there when you're walking up the hall, you know, he can't see a BB gun, but he's not going to go, excuse me, can you tell him, is that a BB gun you got right there? I mean, that's not real. And we live in split-second moments. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we have to dig deeper and call these police departments, and I'm saying to the police departments in this long political tirade, start protecting your officers from the standpoint, if you're going to release their video footage, then you release that audio transcript and let the people hear what the caller is saying. Because a lot of these brothers getting guns pointed at them, certainly not all, but a lot of them that are unarmed getting guns pointed at them that look bad, go back and find out what the girlfriend said when she called the police.
So all of it or none of it.
That's right.
Right.
Well, we have to have transparency across the board. See, you can't manipulate people's thoughts and say, oh, I believe you. Like, I think that it's very possible for, to be in a situation where, oh, all the information wasn't put out, so of course we're going to see, all we see is a police officer shooting a minority, and then, well, and I mean, like, it relates to what we're getting into. It's just the thing is, we might not be accepting, or you know what I mean, we might be kind of like selective understanding. In other words, now with what you're saying, now that someone has come out and said that the dispatch actually tipped off the cop and said that that Tamir Rice had an AK-47, it's like, well, if I had heard that before seeing the reports of a police officer shooting a child with a toy gun, I would have thought, well, what racist person had the idea in their head? What idea in your head made you truly think that, or was so valid that you, let's call the cops on this little kid that's really doing nothing wrong, and that adds to it.
And I want to have a civilian standpoint, because I know both of you gentlemen have served in the service, but one thing we have to address as citizens of this country, why does it look so bad if an African-American man or woman has a weapon in their hand? Because the narrative is different.
That's true. This is true.
That is one of the bigger issues. I know that from the videos I've seen, and I can estimate as a human being, just analyzing it myself, I see that there's a lot different engagement, because I've seen other officers engage a white individual, and they still didn't draw their weapon, and they had a weapon. There was a guy in the park. I think I saw a YouTube video, and he had a gun. And the officer, I think, actually got shot because he was trying to disarm him. And that's what I wonder, how are we going to handle that we look a lot differently with the weapon in our hand versus our counter white Americans.
But you know what? That is interesting. I'll give you a second, Stan. But that is interesting, isn't it? That why you've never seen, officer, or typically, let's keep it real. You've never seen white officers fighting, willing to get shot, not saying they're not out there, but you don't typically hear about that in the news. Officer got shot trying to get a gun from, a black male, you know what I mean? Versus, it's like, well, wait a minute, like, the danger of having a weapon is wrong across the board. So if you're willing to put your body on the line to save everyone for one culture in America, then why won't you do it for the rest?
I think that, and it goes back to what I said earlier, America has been, you've got this cultural ingrained ignorance. The black and brown faces on violent crime. You can blame the Bloods and the Crips, but when we talk about going into a school and shooting innocent kids and you're a white male, nobody said, well, that's just Bob. Las Vegas, what's the first thing? Lone Wolf. See, white mass murderers,
right there.
Right, but white mass murderers are either all lone wolves or, well, they all have psychological problems. Now, this is not an attack on everybody white. I'm just going by what the media says. So if I were to believe the media, that every one of these white guys that goes in and does one of these mass shootings is crazy, then if we're going to build a wall to keep Mexicans down south and we're going to put up a Muslim ban to keep people out, most of which a terrorist act hasn't happened in 15 years in many of those countries, then what are we going to do to white folks that are running around here doing these mass murders?
Well, it's transparency. Hold everybody accountable, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we have to get into education. And we have to say, okay, stop being afraid. I have to be approachable to where white folks feel they can come talk to me. And I want to be able to come talk to you. I don't want you to come, and I say this because it's real, I don't want to be in uniform and have you come across the room and want to pray for me or tell me that you're praying for me. God bless you for what you're doing. Thank you for your service. Then I'm walking somewhere in gym clothes and you locking your car doors, the same people running the other way. You know, so, I mean, that's why the whole thing with my picture, if the guy on this side makes you feel comfortable, but the guy on this side makes you afraid, the problem's not with me, it's with you, because both of these are who I am.
Yeah. And you're the other guy more than this guy.
Well, you got to be, because, you know, the fact of the matter is, no matter how much you know, I love my job, I love serving people, and I work with a lot of great people, but whether I die or retire, the next day, a year from that day, somebody else is going to be badge 224. I may be a picture on a wall that you guys can't even see. You got to buzz through a coded door to get to. People are going to walk by that picture a while and not even remember. Why do I do what I do? Because I might make a difference in your life, or your life, something you transfer to your kids, something. It's not a matter that you remember you got it from me, but if it's something good that comes from it, then I never die. That's when it's bigger than you.
Yeah. That's when you live forever.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to get into our last topic. So, Colin Kaepernick in the NFL files a grievance against the NFL owners that basically for collusion. He believes that evidence is on the table that collusion with the NFL owners and not signing him this whole season is possible. Now, I don't know personally if that's true. One thing, the reason I wanted to bring this topic out is I'll say something about Colin Kaepernick. It's very interesting the backlash he receives for using his First Amendment right in talking about police brutality and talking about police reform, and how the narrative has been changed, as said earlier, multiple times, just to try to paint not just him, but black people. Let's keep it real. So, in other words, if you're not aligned with the way police do things now, like you've said also earlier, Stan, you're looked at as anti-police. So pretty much the community that Colin Kaepernick represents is being looked at in that light and in that shadow. And my thing about it is, if we really were content on actually changing the issue instead of trying to cover up the messenger, which is what we're doing, then we might actually get somewhere. But just to bring it back, he started with police brutality, and despite the fact that he's not been able to play, has not been signed to a team, he has the courage to still step up and say, I'm still kneeling, and I'm not ready to stand up yet until after we can acknowledge that police brutality does exist in America and is still going on today.
I talked about it a little bit this morning on my show, and Colin Kaepernick's original protest was about police brutality, and it's been hijacked. And this is my opinion. I don't care one way or another about the NFL, and I said to a guy this morning on my show, I think those players, by and large, that are taking a knee are taking a knee because they're saying, just like I do in my profession, right, that I do, and I choose to speak out about certain things, they recognize that when they leave that football field, they've got to come out here and potentially deal with some of the very issues that Colin Kaepernick is talking about.
Michael Ben.
There you go. Right. But see, the NFL is concerned about money. That's all they care about. And, how do we control this thing that's gotten out of the bag? And
their image.
Right. So for all you patriots that are so locked up in the flag and you're so patriotic, I served in the military. His protest has got nothing to do.
Thank you for your service, too, also.
Thank you, sir. Same to you. It's got nothing to do with the anthem. Each branch of the military has its own anthem. Okay? It has nothing to do with the troops. And I would say to this, if you don't like Colin Kaepernick's stance, and obviously people are, that's your right to do so, then I want to see you use that same fervor that you use to throw cups of juice or beer on people at a Lakers game. Then why weren't you out there in the lobby when the national anthem was playing and people were walking around buying soda, using the bathroom, and on their cell phones? Why aren't you do it when you're in the bar and people are sitting at the bar stool knocking down cold ones while the anthem's playing? Then why don't you do it to yourself when you're sitting on the couch or in the lazy boy while the anthem's playing at the house? So you can't be conveniently patriotic.
And why aren't you checking on our veterans that a lot of them are still walking these streets?
Well,
I mean, I'm just going to say it. I walk the streets intentionally. And if you really want to pledge, let's pledge to those guys. Because I go out there and visit with the veterans all the time out there. Because I know those are our brothers and sisters out there, and they've done some good work for us.
Shout out to the Roundtable community. Shout out to the vets, of course, that are watching, listening, of course. Yeah, I agree with you. Please continue.
Yeah. So that's really like you said. Where is your patriotism only when it doesn't reflect on you? Because that's really what's going on. You only want it to reflect when it's needed, when it's right. To mask something, to mask a feeling, an attention.
And there's an agenda behind doing that too.
Right. Oh, definitely. Yeah. You wouldn't do it if there wasn't an agenda. I mean, because we're all citizens. I mean, honestly, to me, at this point in day, we need to address the whole anthem. They just removed one stanza that was talking about killing people that look like you and I, and no one wants to address that. If you want us to accept it, at least treat us fairly. If or rewrite the whole thing. Let's get a fresh start.
Oh, that would be too much work. Who would want to do that?
Hey, that's one of my recommendations. Right. I'm just throwing something out there. But sometimes when you want to be all inclusive, you have to do things, and change is hard, and you have to do it.
Well, I applaud Colin Kaepernick. I support him. I think that he's getting a lot of flack and blame for a lot of offshoot groups and a lot of satellite Johnny-come-latelys that are attaching to his message. And I think, and I played the clip this morning on my radio show from his mouth, what he was standing for, why he's doing, not my interpretation and nobody else's. I'm going to take that man at his word. And for all these people who want to throw him up under the bus, if you can take 45 sitting up there in the White House at his word daily, you can at least give Colin Kaepernick not the benefit of the doubt, but the benefit of the facts.
Exactly. And on that note, any final thoughts for Roundtable?
I just appreciate you guys coming all the way down to Waco, and I enjoy your crowd. I listen to your shows, and thank everybody for listening.
Absolutely. Stephen?
Yeah, again, I'd just like to tack on what you said. Thank you for inviting us into your home. I've had a great time, and we appreciate what you do on and off the streets, and keep us all safe. So we appreciate you, and plus you standing up, that's really says a lot about character, and I appreciate both you guys' service to all of our soldiers out there. I love you guys. We just love you guys, man. Thanks for listening in.
Shout out to Endo Enterprises. Shout out to Behind the Blue Curtain, all the followers of Stephen and Stan. Shout out, of course, to the Roundtable. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.